And start with a roll call.
Treat it ex officio.
Bill Spence, alternate. That's me.
John Racine, member.
Yes, and I,
Terry Waite, member.
Wendy Roth gave a number.
Larson, member.
Rob Wilson, alternate.
Okay, Rob, we're gonna seat you today. Set Bill last month.
But it's YouTube, it's not Ustream, right?
Yes, you
Yeah. She was saying
Okay,
Ustream.
first
And I
on
thought you had changed back. That's why I was trying to make
the
it work.
agenda is the
on the stream.
review and acceptance of the meeting minutes of August 9th.
I could have made YouTube go. She's been Ustream.
I think that's
Yeah, well, mine never came.
She's good enough.
but that's where the document is.
We
have
Come on.
I get my mail, yeah. Say maybe it's there because I don't have to search for it.
You didn't do your homework.
I did, I even did more because I had a copy this
Yeah.
morning. Yesterday. You did. I looked at that. Boy. Oh, okay.
There's a lot of work in
Is it two-sided?
This, Steve?
Why don't we share it?
Belkin wireless.
I had it.
Oh, okay, good. All right, okay.
Thank you.
Are we trying to muffle the audio for the?
Yeah.
I didn't say we shouldn't, I just.
Yes. Full screen around here somewhere. That's good enough. Yeah.
She's making copies. She'll have them in a minute.
Yeah, a couple lines, 35 and 47. She's not here.
That's right.
You're getting it, your audio and video, so go ahead and make the changes.
You need to change was to were.
Yes, I agree. 35 and 37, you said?
35 and 47.
Any other questions or comments? Need further time?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
Is it a second?
I'll second that.
All in
Yeah,
favor?
yeah.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the
in the end.
Minutes of,
Oh, yeah, yeah, now, yeah, I talked to Mike after, too, so he's all set.
oh,
No, thank you, so.
July 12th, thank you.
Kept saying
Has been accepted as amended.
That's right.
And we'll start off with,
it's like
start, the old
Thank you.
business,
We'll see how it
Tara
goes.
Bamford continues to work on the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of things we can talk about while you're waiting for the copies. A little concerned though that might mean people don't should be, you know, we're not really where we should be in August because of that. It's gonna be really important this couple months to be coming to the meetings prepared if you're gonna not be in a rush during public hearing time.
I had a couple things. I don't know, if you wanna just,
I just had a couple
You
other
wanna start
things
going down
before
through
you
them?
have the copies, a couple things. We had talked at some point about a couple of the little odd pieces of districts that were kind of orphaned by other changes, and I don't think there was really a discussion with consensus of whether you were gonna propose those changes this town meeting or not. I don't know if I should be writing something for those.
Bill, is that the thing that, what you were talking about in the email?
About what?
Making particular changes that might affect what's already in place. Like we've got these oddball zoning districts that are sticking out a little. And we had talked originally about maybe in the new set of zoning ordinances, eliminating those. I mean, you have to grandfather them, obviously, so you know about that, but perhaps redraw the map so that it doesn't have these outlying zones. And you had expressed, at least.
Well, I expressed a concern about changing the intended use of any property without, first of all, going through some kind of an exercise of looking at what the master plan says for the valley and potentially updating the master plan for the valley, because I think the conditions have changed so radically over the last 4 or 5 years that I'm not sure, you know, what we, admittedly, there's not very much vacant property, and before we change what that vacant property can be used for, I think we ought to have a discussion about, you know, the use of that property in relationship to the, you know, to the health and growth of the valley.
These changes were talked about as ways to bring the zoning more in line with your master plan and in line with the village.
Yeah, but I don't think, did anybody read the master plan? Has anybody
Well-
read the master plan?
Well, it was pages from it talking about the land use that we had in front of us when we had that conversation, and it was,
Yeah,
I had
but-
handed out that
Right,
section of the
I
master plan.
understand that,
so-
but my comment remains the same. I'm not so sure that the master plan is all that valid, given the changes that the valley has undergone in the last 5, 6 years.
Well, that's not for me to
It's my-
say,
I
but
understand.
is, you know, from a land use perspective, what, you know, it does jump out at me as land use planner as being counter to what you're trying to do with the village area, to have this, it's 3 lots that are right out here, that are village commercial, and 2 lots, as you head into the village on the right-hand side that we were talking about, that are just, I can pass the map around, but, it was just,
No, I didn't.
because not everybody might remember, but I can't write on this.
But anyway, that was my comment, and
I just circled the ones that we're talking about, because I know that you weren't here yet. as part of
Pursuing.
how to strengthen the zoning to concentrate and encourage development in the village center, that was one thing that we talked about early on was, that apparently those are just left from when it was larger and.
So it's the old Jugtown PUD.
It's Emeryville.
On the right-hand side.
Wow,
you're
3
coming
lots
down.
out here
Yeah.
and 2 on a corner.
They've been developed as single-family homes, so there's no.
And it's a PUD, right?
Well, it was called that, but I don't think that it was ever developed as specifically as a PUD. It was
Oh, I
developed
thought
as
they were
single family.
substandard lot sizes, and that's how they got around it. But-
No, they're all at least a half an acre.
Okay,
Do they have the required distance between houses?
There may have been something like that. I'm not sure, Terry, but
And a
they're
PUD,
developed, they're not gonna,
What you're saying is it wasn't developed as PUD because there's no paperwork.
There's no open-
association.
yeah, there's no open space, they did not have any open space or anything like that.
So-
We may have changed setbacks.
if you were talking about making it HDR, you're also talking about allowing PUDs in
Right,
HDR, so
exactly.
it's not
Yeah,
gonna make
it's
it
not gonna
grandfathered
change.
either way.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not gonna be non-conforming.
Just back to your original question, though, just for my own understanding. If it was decided that, yeah, we're gonna go and we're gonna make a sensible zoning map, and it's going to follow what would normally be expected in the zoning, and, what would happen to these areas that were at one time zoned a particular way, and that they would fall into another zone at this particular point, so that zone would be eliminated, let's say? What happens to the structures or the uses that were in that zone that was allowed that is no longer an appropriate zone? They get grandfathered at first, I would assume.
Well, back up a little bit, because I had thought the conversation was too that there weren't any commercial uses on those 5 lots. That uses on those lots are compatible with the residential zones that you'd be making it. So I don't think grandfathering
Yeah.
is an issue in them.
So is it only?
with the exception of lot 3, it's shown on this map. That has always been planned as, that's down alongside the sewage treatment plant, on this side of the road. And the thought was, although it's vacant today, that would be some kind of a contractor's lot, something like that along those lines. So I'm not so sure that the best use of that particular property would be residential. Well, I don't know what the proposal was to change these from to.
Yeah, I don't think you got that far. That's why I was
Yeah.
bringing it up again. I think the
Okay.
conversation was just, that's not village. Why is it village district? Maybe that's special civic and the others are residential. But that's, it's August, so it's time to decide and have me write some language for it. And have an early, what I've been encouraging you to move quickly on this is so you're not having last minute public hearings and rushing a second one, but for these especially, where you have to send the notice to the lot owner and give them a chance to weigh in, you want to allow plenty of time to reconsider if somebody does come in and was just about to file an application for the contract yard and it sounds okay, that kind of thing. That's why when it's a small area rezoning, you now need to send a notice to every lot owner. So it's time to be deciding whether you're gonna explore that.
So you having looked at the map, Tara, we did discuss this way back at the beginning.
Right.
You
But
feel that these are the only 2 that you circled here that?
Those were the 2 you had consensus about that. I don't know how to describe them in road places, but you talked some about this and there wasn't consensus on it. There seemed to be some feeling of leaving that as is or going to HDR. But there seemed to be consensus on. maybe you can explain to the board what I just said in terms that they would know.
Well, it appears you get circled here is, we get consensus on, it looks like the beginning of Noon Peak Road where the Verizon,
Yeah, where the Verizon building
And
is.
it's
That's-
the Gordon's house too, right?
that's village commercial at this particular point?
Yeah.
And then the other one would be down, down here at the.
It's the
across
old,
Yes, the area down here where they were gonna put the storage and it's across the way where the house is. And another plot there as well, and that also is village.
right, that's right here on the other side of the parking lot.
And it's been already partially developed with
One of the
individual
lots
residents.
is residential,
Yeah,
right.
Well, yeah, there's two residential lots on the other side of Triple I Road. And then there's a single lot right here on the other side of the parking lot, across from the dumpsters, that is being used as a contractor storage yard.
you said there's two residential lots.
There's two residential lots
Well, there's
over
one
there. There's
residence.
one that's built and there's one that's vacant. There are two lots there.
And they're
It's
both,
now it's now village commercial, so
It
it's not
is village
necessarily a
commercial.
residential lot then.
That's right, but that's correct. There are two lots over there. One has been, a house has been put on it.
Right.
The other one is vacant. They are village commercial.
And
And
the
then-
other area in question is, it looks like Forest Knoll. Forest, there's two, I get these guys mixed up all the time. Forest Rim and Forest Knoll. What's the one at Tecumseh and Valley Road? Forest Knoll.
That's Forest
Forest
Knoll
Yeah.
1 and 2.
So
Yeah.
apparently that is also the village commercial zone as well.
It is.
That's the way it's
Uh.
on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just been developed out as high density,
Yeah. It's just the way
it's
it
condos,
Yeah.
I mean, but.
This is only a portion of that, from what I can tell. So there may be other areas as well. But
Well,
That's the whole map. I mean, you're.
See,
this
there's
is- So you're talking this area here, this, and this.
yeah, this was the one that wasn't consensus on.
Right. This one right here,
Mhm.
and this,
Right.
they had consensus.
I thought so, yeah.
Did you guys have this? So this is the contractor yard, right? This, here's town hall. And then you get the two.
So if you change that from village commercial, the contract yard would become a grandfather non-conforming
This
use.
is the corner.
And the only ones that are apparently that were in question are the village commercial.
Where you,
Consensus.
Well, my point would be on the one where the contractor's yard is now, is that is like, that could potentially change.
Yeah.
And what would we want down there? I don't think we want residential property down there at all. That's my only point. So even if it were to change, I'd keep it as village commercial. Or, either that or have the town buy it or something.
or special civic. You don't want high housing
Well,
there.
special civic is so limited, that means that the only, making something special civic and the town not buying it is equivalent to saying the land will stay vacant forever. And I question that.
I mean, the consideration is when it changes, right now, it could change to a McDonald's or a dollar store or
Sure.
a Dunkin' Donuts. And
Absolutely.
is that compatible with the community and the plan, and is that encouraging development and activity in the village center?
And we're trying to make everything more centered.
But I don't think before we make any decisions like that, we would copy the whole map. And then what an ideal zoning would be, starting at the center, which would be commercial.
Well, you started now.
The whole map's right there.
You talked
Yeah.
about it.
The zoning map is right there.
That's the pieces that were an
Right.
issue.
right now, I haven't got anything in my head that says what the ideal situation would be. I've got a little map here that tells me that there's a couple of village commercial zones that
Right.
are in question, but I mean, I don't know what would make it better.
Months ago,
Yeah, we
that's
did.
where we started.
Right, but we didn't really
So-
pursue that very long. We didn't get very far into it.
I thought we did, and those were the ones that, the reason I handed it out is those are the ones that there was consensus on changing after reviewing the map.
But is there a plan or a map or a drawing that shows, look, this would be the ideal zoning setup for this town? Without, say you were starting it out for the first time, and you were going to say, when you're going to zone a town, it's best to start with a focal point, which is the commercial area, and then work your way
Right.
outwards to the village commercial, let's say, or the less dense areas, then your LDR, and then your,
Mhm.
I assume HDR, and then your LDR. But we don't have anything like that.
I feel you do, and I feel that that's where we started months ago, was sitting down with the master plan, with the land use language and the zoning map, and have that conversation, and those were the ones that you ended up talking about changing for that reason, with the goal in mind of this whole project of trying to encourage more dense development in the village.
Well, maybe the rest of the board has that in their head. I just can't picture the map, so it'd be help on this.
Well, I think it makes sense to what is right abutting the stream for most of it, isn't it? We wouldn't want any commercial development there anyway. And, well, we have condos in the other one, so no one's gonna be put out by it. And it's more, like Eric was saying, looking ahead, 10 years from now, if something catastrophic happens to, say, I don't know, Forest Knoll, and someone comes in with a whole shopping center plan for there. 10, 15 years from now, do we want that? And I think that's what we have to keep in mind, that's what we're looking at and planning for. So looking at HDR for the Fairpoint Place, Forest Knoll, and I'm not sure what for across the street, some sort of residential, HDR maybe, and special civic on this side of the street.
Well, why don't we take the easy ones, all right, and we'll work from there. I mean, Emeryville. Does anybody have a problem with changing the zoning on Emeryville? There's 4 houses now built there, and to make it,
What's the
well, that's a little chunk that's.
Right on Village.
It's all over on, backs up to
Yes, where Lenny's house.
where Lenny's
That
house
doesn't
is.
help me.
No, I know. It's on Valley Road on the right-hand side.
Is it one of the
At
two
the-
circles?
I think it's one of the
It's
two
just-
circles, right?
It's the first right as you.
It's not one
Triple I
circle.
Road.
It's
It's
not.
not, it's already zoned, what? It's already zoned residential?
I don't know, that's sure.
So what is in the circle? That's basically just the property that's owned by, the telephone company?
It's on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Forest Knoll.
Well, no, let's take the first circle and make sure that we
That's
understand.
the
It's the
Verizon.
property that's
The
owned by
Verizon.
Verizon.
It's Verizon.
The little
So
corner on
we want to
Village.
change that from village commercial to what?
HDR.
HDR.
And the Verizon building would still be allowed, that wouldn't
Right.
become non-conforming.
Yeah, but why?
Because what happens
Well,
20 years from now?
Yeah, what happens when the Verizon sells the property? What happens next? Do you want to limit it to, or have it still zoned as village commercial, or would you like it to be like what all the surrounding area is? This is what the whole point is. You get these little pockets of specialized zoning that were developed the zoning kind of came about as a result of the development. rather than the development.
No, actually, the zoning predates the development of the entire valley. It never ever got developed according to Corcoran's plan.
Well, that's right, because it could change.
Because the reality
The
of the
development
world
would come
changed.
around and we would change the zoning to fit the development.
Clearly.
Yeah.
There's a square just for Verizon. So
And I guess
somehow
that's what I'm saying, we should go back to that, like you're saying, at one time, there was a zone map that probably made some sense.
But Terry, that's that we're talking about right now.
Based on a
Go
concept
into
of
that.
that the ski mountain was really going to be Stones Mountain, not the
Right. But my point is, if you have a town, you have a town square, you have a perfect center, a hub, that you would say, this is the commercial area. And then as you radiate out away, you get to a less dense, and less dense use. So it's almost as if you draw concentric circles. Obviously, that's not your zoning you're gonna end up, but then you start adapting it perhaps to physical features. And you disregard what's been done, and then you say, this is what it would be like if we really had the ideal zoning for this particular. We're going to eliminate this little pocket as a foreign zone at this particular point, even though its use is established that little pocket. You say, well, grandfather that use, but then if that building or that use is no longer happening, it gets torn down, gets sold or something like that, the new use would be more appropriate for the overall zone.
You wouldn't be
So why
grandfather,
would
you wouldn't
make it
you wouldn't need to
single
grandfather it.
Well,
It would-
You
Let me
didn't
just,
say that. You said.
you wouldn't need to
I meant-
grandfather it. It wouldn't be non-conforming because public utility and public service installations are allowed in
Yeah.
that
Well,
HDR.
All right,
So
if you
even-
make it high density, could somebody build condominiums on that lot?
Well, Winter Hill's right there, why would that be bad?
Somebody could, is it big enough?
Well, I guess that you'd have to take it over. You'd have to
Well,
look at
it does matter, if it's
Well,
not
and now on
buildable, why would
village
you wanna make something?
It could be bought and combined with another. It's not
Like
that-
Winter Hill's right there, say they wanted to add another building and
Well,
put the big lot.
You know,
You never know, but it is compatible with what's surrounding it.
I understand that.
I think that your idea is a little bit more limiting than the other idea. If you got that one little spot and that's the only thing it can be used for.
Well, no, village commercial gives you, is my understanding, is a lot of flexibility. It can be used for anything from high density to single family to, you name it.
If you
Right.
go high
Change
density.
that? Are we gonna change that?
Yeah,
We're gonna
you
change
gotta
that.
change that.
Cause that's dumb.
It's not gonna be single.
That's what
You
the problem is.
think it's dumb, but,
We all do.
well, yeah, I understand, but I don't think it's dumb at all. And I question again whether we should be changing that in light of the fact that we have a master plan that's multi years old and hasn't been given any thought at all. Well, change it,
It didn't,
go ahead, you have the votes to change it. But I'm telling you, from what I've read, if it ever got to the point where somebody took you to court, you'd lose. Because you didn't even bother to look at the master plan, which is the
Well,
criteria
that's
that the court's gonna use.
except that that's how we started this project with my diagram with the circles that Terry just talked
Right.
about and those sections of that.
How many
and the map.
people on this have read the master plan? I mean, I wrote it.
The
I-
planning board, we wrote it,
Right.
we read it.
Okay.
We read it, we reworked it. but-
All right,
Casey is looking for a four-season resort area.
I mean, that's what I thought my direction was in this whole project is helping you bring the zoning in line with the master plan and the village pedestrian plan.
But just to clarify, that is the Fairpoint lot and the Gordon lot, right? And that-
Well, it's the whole village commercial right here beside the
No,
town
no, I mean,
facility.
just that little corner.
In the corner is the Verizon
But
building.
it's the Gordons as well, it's not that little rectangle is?
No, it is the Verizon building to Village Road. That's all it is. It does not, all those houses, all of the houses are already high-density residential, if you look at the map.
And just to clarify,
It's-
once you make the change where you take single family out of village commercial, you couldn't change from the Verizon building to a home.
Right.
So by changing it, you're enabling that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that it was just that lot.
So if you, the lot that the Verizon building sits on is extremely small. The property boundary of that lot is almost touching the building. Between the building and the road belongs to the town, okay? And so the town has the actual corner lot on Noon Peak and Valley Road.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so where you see the little building right down here, the little gray square,
Gotcha.
that is the Verizon building. So that's actually the second lot.
So Mark, you're saying the first lot's owned by the town?
The first lot on the corner is town property.
Does it make sense to put that in special civic with the ones across the street?
I mean, you could, I think the way it is right now, if anyone challenged us, I think that a court looking at this map would say spot zoning. You know, they would just, there's no other village commercial anywhere around it. I think our choices would be high density residential or special civic. I mean, those are the only zones anywhere near that, right, Tara?
Right. I mean, and you could take the one the town owns and have a logic for making that
Logic
special
of
civic
making it,
and
yeah.
making the Verizon lot be high density.
The lot that Verizon building is on, what size is that? Is that?
Oh, it's probably a quarter of an acre or so.
So it's really not a buildable lot, is it?
No, it's still half acre zoning unless we change that, right?
Yeah, you're not talking about.
We're not talking about changing any of the dimension
No.
requirements, so.
Not the lot.
So it would still be, they'd still have to have a half an acre to do something.
So really, it's not a buildable lot at all.
No,
Regardless of the zone.
right, but I still think that, you know, you never know what's gonna happen down the road. And if Windsor Hill were to purchase that and do a lot line adjustment or whatever, I mean, potentially another building or whatever, you know, those kinds of things might happen in the future. So,
But my point is, regardless of the zone, it's an unbuildable lot.
So,
unless it's combined with something else, that's correct.
So, I mean, changing the zone wouldn't affect that in any way, or vice.
And then you
For the
actually
Verizon
open,
lot, but which way did you want to go with the town lot? And did my drawing
No.
finish going around?
yeah,
Oh.
so Mark brought down copies. Oh, you
I got, yeah, they've all got the big one now.
put Tara
Tara.
probably wants hers back.
And I did talk to the other two. Which ones are talking about. So you do open it up to be developable because you do give, you know, if you change it to HDR as an example, even if it's both lots changing it. Windsor Hill then has, as an example, an opportunity to say, hey, we want to do something with this. Can we buy the lot?
Now, looking at this, it also brings to mind, why did we make the Forest Knoll complex village commercial?
Well-
It's village commercial, which allowed for village no.
Oh,
Right, remember our
doesn't make
our
sense. though.
uses, right, but there were a couple of reasons. First of all, Stone Property Management is in that block of
Yeah.
parcels, okay? And secondly, high-density residential, under our old uses construct, the uses were stacked, So high-density use in the village commercial zone was allowed. So we didn't want a quote-unquote spot zone.
Yeah.
So it was, I think it was, when we looked at it, only the Stone property management parcel and the one beside it, right here.
Yeah.
Those two lots were village commercial, and then I think the Forest Knoll parcels were actually something else. I don't know if they were low density or high density residential. But we actually, I think when we made the last change of the tax map, we actually grew that village commercial zone there. But it was most directly because of the Stone property management parcel.
It's almost like you're just looking at the map in the sense that we were talking about originally as far as what would make sense.
Yeah.
Rather than that being village commercial, you'd think that the two, one where the village condominiums are, that would be village commercial, and the other one where the Valley Inn and whatever was in the back there, that would be village commercial.
High density residential,
Well, or, yeah.
where Forest Knoll and Stone property are,
I
and
guess
you
it
start to
depends
get your rings.
I guess it depends on how much village commercial you want to give yourself.
Well, I think, my guess would have been that since it's adjacent to the settling pool,
It's another
Yeah.
thing too.
that in fact, people surprised that built condominiums there to begin with.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I think it was originally
Yeah.
envisioned all of that was going to be commercial use, although undefined, it was set aside for that purpose.
It doesn't mean it can't stay that way if that's what you still want it to be
No, but
in the future.
just kind of looking at what it is that we originally were trying, or looking at anyway, I don't see anybody was in line with what we're trying to do. And then you look at those pea green ones up there on those special civic.
Those are special civic.
Yeah, way off in the distance, well, especially get the cemetery, which obviously.
Well, the library and the VBTS building are the special civic up here. The VBTS
Why is the
dormitory.
VBTS special civic? That's not town.
I don't know why they did it. But that was always kind of an anomaly.
Why not?
Yeah,
Well, it has been contentious.
it has. It has.
Because it limits to what you could have there as a school.
Right.
But you could not have a dormitory, and that has always been the contentious issue.
But that's a private school, and can you have a private school in a special civic?
I think so. I don't think it specifies
Yes.
type of school.
Yes.
Correct.
you
It
can.
does not.
Well, we don't have an answer to the question, Tara.
Well, what about if we look at the lot? If we bypass a little crown lot here and look at the lot adjacent to here and across the street, can we do anything with this? But, you know, this one here. Is that consensus?
And what would you make them?
Special civic on this side of the street and
HDR.
HDR, LDR across the street. I mean, we don't want development along the river. And it's probably limited anyway, right, by the green belt?
So you probably want LDR, not
LDR. I do LDR on the other side of the street and special civic on this side.
But if the goal is to kind of make everything look the same, why would we have one? I mean, changing it from village commercial as a little thing to residential is a little thing. It's the residential is completely separated from anything else that looks like residential. I mean, admittedly, somebody built a single family home down there, but
do we, I mean, it's right along a river. Do we want to encourage commercial along there?
And I think being that far from the town center would qualify for LDR. If you're thinking of concentric thing. development.
There's a good argument for zoning it for what it is and not allowing commercial development to take away from your village.
Well, it's at the limit. It's a lot that's at the limit, and that's kind of a common theme, that the limit lots seem to be low density residential. Not in all cases, but certainly up in the north end there.
Well, I'm assuming that the reason that that was village commercial was because of Route 49 running up to the ski mountain there was envisioned that sometimes somebody was gonna build commercial establishments there.
But you've got Jennings Peak Road down there, which is low density residential, it's about the same.
Yeah, no, right.
What really sticks out is the village commercial for Forest Knoll, in my mind. Just seems out of place. That,
Very different. I'm not sure that it's gonna be practical to build on, but you never know. Somebody can come along.
you could put in Lagoon Drive on the road down here.
No, that's why it's clean water lane.
Oh,
It's not clear water, it's clean water. So yes, there is a separate lot in there.
Were you not close to consensus on the Verizon lot
I thought so.
I think we are, aren't we?
to go to HDR?
HDR,
And would the town lot go to HDR or special civic?
Which town?
Next to
the one on the corner of Noon Peak.
Oh, no, I think HDR,
For both?
yeah,
I mean,
because,
I think it's the,
yeah, you have the street creating an island, really.
Okay,
Well, there's two lots in that.
there's two lots in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would change them both to HDR. I mean, the practicality of it is we have a right of way, the town has a right of way that goes through there for the road and the sidewalk, so those aren't impacted. And if somebody really wanted to use the property, there's really no intrinsic value to, other than maybe signage, Bill. But that could be discussed if somebody made us an offer for it.
and special civic for down here and LDR across the street. I mean, those were the ones that my sense was you had some consensus on. The other big chunk of,
Who owns the
Village.
property that we're gonna make special civic? That's Canton,
Can't,
Waterville Company?
Yeah.
So what you wanna do is restrict his right to do anything with that. Because that's the effect of it.
And that's why we have public hearings and talk to the owner and
Well,
reevaluate if there's
we'll
pushback.
see whether he comes in compliance, but,
Right.
what you're doing is basically taking his property and saying, you can't develop it.
well,
Was that where we wanted to put the garages?
Yeah, that's where he wanted. to put
it's
the
already,
garage.
the garages are already, well, not garages, storage units are already approved. However, they gotta be closing in if they haven't already gotten to their
Yeah, I'm
third year
assuming he's given up on
time
that.
frame. So
Yeah.
that's probably not an issue at this point, but yeah, I think that's a conversation you have to have with him is it's adjacent to special civic. It's 200 feet from our sewer treatment facilities.
Would the town be willing to buy it? I mean, because the way to solve that problem is for the town to say, okay, we'll buy it.
with any of the zoning changes, you're changing what somebody can do with the
Right.
property, with all of them, and that's
Right.
why I encourage you not to wait till the last minute and only have the, dot the I public hearing, but really start that process early in the fall.
But I think the other part of the question, Bill, is do you want commercial development along the road up to the ski area? and not in the town center. It's like Terry's question of the concentric circles, you know, and if you're okay with having commercial development on the road to the ski area, then you leave it. But I think the whole idea here was to kind of solidify where you wanted the commercial development, because that's at least part of it. Because remember the last time we
I, for
changed that
one,
parcel.
would allow commercial development on that chunk of property. That's just my opinion. I see no reason not to allow commercial development on that. It's been zoned that way. Somebody bought it with that understanding. And so I'm sitting here saying, why are we taking his rights away? What?
And in my mind, in 15 years, someone else very well could be the owner of that property and work with a
Right.
McDonald's franchise and put that there.
But if you
That's
make
what
it
we
special
want.
civic, it becomes an unsaleable piece of property, other than to the town. Who can buy it?
A church? Aren't we looking for a place?
Well,
I mean, look at.
A church, you would want a church down there, as opposed, I don't,
I'm just throwing out things.
yeah, I know, but I think for all intents and purposes, you're making land unsaleable. My comment would be, if you wanna make it unsaleable, buy it.
Well, what about if the lot was granted grandfather status for the current owner? I mean, you could sell it as a commercial lot, that could be developed as commercial at one time.
Once you change the zoning, it can only be
If there's a
Right.
structure.
the kind of use it is. You can't,
You can't grandfather, I believe, an old zoning to a vacant piece of land, right?
right, he could go to the zoning board to change the use to something that's, I'd have to look at your wording or what wording we have in there, but something that's not less compatible with the district.
The only thing that would be grandfathered is if that approved plan hadn't reached the 4-year limit or whatever it is for the start of the project, then he would have that right. If it still exists, he would have that right to build what was approved.
Right, but I was wondering what language you had about changing from one non-conforming use to another.
And the contractor yard that is there, I'm assuming would be allowed, you know, there's a concrete pad there for the salt storage during the winter, and it's being used as a contractor's storage yard. And, you know, there is a person who has a lease on that property to use it for that purpose. So I would assume that that would be grandfathered. And that's what it's been being used for what, 4 or 5 years now, right?
Mhm.
Will's before he moved over. Now Pete Hickson has a lease on it, is our understanding.
It could be a valuable piece of commercial property going to and from the ski area.
Realistically, unless something radically changes, you know, in terms of the desirability of Waterville, not likely.
Mhm.
But, so I would, you know, my only thing is there's a couple of solutions the town has. The town really believes that vacant property will stay vacant, they're gonna buy it. I mean, this is the argument I've heard on Nelson Woods for years. Why can't we make Nelson Woods a greenway? Well, we can buy it and do whatever we want with it.
You don't allow change from one non-conforming use to another. You don't have language saying you can do that if it's no less compatible. That might be something that you want to add as you make these zoning changes to give give people a little bit more flexibility. If you're changing a lot of uses in a lot of districts, this might be a good time to look at that. Because right, because right now you say may not undergo change in any of the following ways, and it includes change to another non-conforming use, period. So,
Yeah, you may wanna change.
Do a lot of towns allow for that?
yeah, a lot allow with a special exception and some criteria that it's not less, not less. Because the way you're written right now, even if it was there a question? Sorry, is there a question?
I was talking about that Bill wasn't familiar with Nelson Catholic.
I'm not familiar with anything except for that. Right now, you wouldn't be able to allow a change to one that's better in terms of impact, the way it's worded.
Makes sense to look at anyway, doesn't it?
How does everybody feel about that commercial property with the river behind it?
Well,
Any thoughts about that?
there are, because of the DES, there are all kinds of rules associated with what you can and cannot do next to that river.
So if we leave a commercial property, then there would be restrictions on what could go up in that property.
There are state restrictions as to how close you can go to the river. That's correct. But at least that's my understanding, there are state restrictions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the shoreline protection zone, so it's gonna be limited. It isn't that the use in particular is limited, it's how close they can get to the river.
Yeah.
So.
Excuse me.
We've been at this for an hour. Have you decided anything?
Right, there's a lot more.
Well, I
to do.
think you need to move beyond me. I think what you're, if there's consensus from everybody else to change these, you do it. And we'll go to a public hearing, we'll find out if Bill Cantlin shows up or not.
And
I mean, if he, I don't know, maybe he's completely lost interest in these.
And I'm gonna write it with some suggested language to make the non-conforming uses more flexible, so that would be one vote, right, one ballot, that those would go together,
Yeah.
maybe.
And we have to look at the big picture, if a property owner has a piece of property, a lot that's gonna be changed, they may also have another lot that will become more valuable, more concentrated because it's now more concentrated for commercial
Right.
use. We're not.
Because it's gonna be more flexible and.
Right.
So I'm thinking that you have 4 or 5 amendments as a way to organize it, plus the 2 rezonings would be separate. There's a few that are non-substantive, there's only a few, but there are that might be their own article. And then I'd suggest doing the uses and definitions together as one, because it's not gonna work if that's broken apart and only part of it passes. And then separate the lighting, the PUD changes, and the parking into their own. That's how I would organize it. And one of the things I sent out, just because it's easier to talk about in these terms, was the table with the uses that we all agreed that the marked up versions should show the specific changes in the district, so I did that, but I also just did the table, how that would look as an amendment. That's one of the things that come up for format, and how that might look. I also saw a list of some other uses that, given a list of uses and what you're trying to do here. Does everybody have that too? Yeah. The one sheet with just 8 items where you go through that list. I looked at, because I rewrote the zoning for Dixville to get ready for the Boston, so we spent a lot of time thinking about resort area language, so I kind of looked at that too. And this first one was one of the things I had up there that I didn't really see specifically, and wondered if it's ever a question of whether somebody's use allows that kind of special events, or whether it's worth articulating it in the permitted uses.
It usually ends up as a select board decision, doesn't it? If someone wants to bring in a special event, is that?
Only if it's on town land. If it's a private, I mean, and for this, when I look at what special events are listed here, you have the New Hampshire high school cross-country race.
Right.
I mean, that sort of thing, the Black Fly Try,
Special event.
all those special event things have all just been handled through the public safety department and making sure that those sorts of issues are taken care of. But if the property owner signs off on it, we allow.
But it's something that, people obviously try to build, they build these businesses and make them sustainable, especially as we lose snow days to climate change. So I thought it might be worth just making it clear in the zoning that that's an allowed part of hotels, recreation centers. And
I think that's a good idea, because like out Tessa, and I think we're gonna see more and more of this, the Warriors, I mean, you just on and on, there's a whole list of them that are starting to be more prominent. So I don't think it's a bad idea to start including it.
And I had the same thought on the skills venues, in the next one.
Yeah, I think that looks good.
And spas, the health and wellness, we talked about that, but I didn't seem to end up adding it anywhere. It seemed like another thing that goes with the hotels and.
Would that be only in the commercial zone or allowed use everywhere?
Would it be one of those things that's accessory to the hotels in the high density? But allowed in commercial buildings?
I think that sounds right.
It makes sense for all three of these, that they're accessory to hotels and recreation centers, but allowed to stand alone in commercial and buildings. Does that make sense? Yeah. So back to the McDonald's and the Dunkin' Donuts. How do you feel about drive-throughs? Do you want to define restaurants as not including drive-throughs, or are you good with that?
I think that's a smart way to limit.
Just a question.
Yeah.
I just spoke to a pedestrian village, so.
Yeah.
Allow drive-throughs.
Well-
Yeah.
Like it.
Non-motorized, non-motorized pass-through.
I'll make sure it doesn't say walk up and. So in trying to clean up the uses and talk about offices and services and whatnot, the one I think got left out a little bit that I wasn't sure was covered by anything was business services. And whether that's something that should be allowed in commercial and village.
Do you have a definition for it?
No, I'm gonna do that next. I wanted to get the uses nailed down, and then I'll have definitions for the next meeting.
Would this be like a delivery type thing or something? What do you?
Well, that's your next step is what do you want these to look like, and let's get the definitions to say that. I don't know, is computer repair or copying covered by the other uses? I just wasn't sure. cleaning, I don't know. Just trying to think of things that might not be covered.
Property management.
Well, we have professional and business offices, and I think
Right.
if, right now, if there were a computer repair shop that came into town, we would have stuck it under professional and business offices. I mean, I don't know if that's specific enough for what you want, or,
Or should
I
it,
mean, Chris and I would have looked at it and said, that's what it is.
or do you want to define professional and business offices to include business services? Are they different ever?
I guess it depends on what you call business services. Like,
A service to something other than an individual probably.
Yeah.
right, so like creating HVAC, I mean, how, like, anything that could transcend into like a factory or type there.
It's like saying a enterprise, wouldn't that be a business service?
Yeah, or even, like I say, a management company, a property
Right.
management company service.
Right, if somebody wanted to like a consulting, I mean, I would think that would fall into
It's a
business.
service.
You know, it's a business
Oh, that's
professional
professional.
office, you know. Without, I wouldn't think there's a need to go to services separate from, if you allow a business and professional office, that's pretty broad.
Okay. So we'll make sure it is when we define it and go, that'll be the next exercise, is whether we got those including the right things. And campground was a question.
Yeah, that should be allowed, shouldn't it? Like in rec.
Well, think about that. Do you wanna encourage camping? Because camping is motorhomes, you know, and,
We sort of already have it though.
well, we've got
Yes.
the federal facilities allow camping.
Yeah.
You know, all different kinds, so do you really want to allow it on town property?
I know.
I don't think so, yeah, that might be.
Doesn't sound like a good use.
Although there is, I mean, there's this special event that we got into a fight over last year, right? With, the people, they're coming back.
They're coming back.
The REI.
Like them.
The REI, right?
Like-
But that's, you know, that's just for 2 days.
That's a special.
That's a special thing.
I don't know, camping like up on Hurley Road, you know, they could do a lot of that out there. They're gonna stop that soon.
But I don't know if you'd want somebody that would open a commercial campground.
Right.
You know, take a piece of the property and say, well, you know, here's a chance to get some rental income for the next couple of years, I'll let people camp on it.
I guess no.
So, we allow it kind of as a temporary special event thing, but not permanent.
Yeah,
allowed use.
that makes sense. One second.
So define special events as may include blah, blah, blah.
Up to a week in,
I gotta write that
Well,
all
no.
down. It's easier.
up to a week in duration or something, or pick an amount of time.
Right, at what point is it not a special event?
Right,
But
in an actual use. I think, you know, if it starts going over a week, it
it's a
starts.
use.
But we do have plenty of camping here already.
We do.
There's another campground right up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 2 national forest campgrounds, plus all the camping on Triple I Road, and there's a campground on the Woodsville end of Triple I Road,
Yeah.
and there's a campground in Campton. I mean, there's plenty of camping.
Okay, The next one, do you want us, you talked about solar and wind for onset use, but I didn't have in my notes that you reached consensus on allowing that as accessory or what you wanted to do.
I would think that we should allow solar and wind farms on special civic property.
Well, I wasn't even bringing up solar and wind farms. We can
Right.
do that too, but my question was, do you need to say that somebody can have solar panels on their house or the yard or?
We went
Like
on
state law said that you had to.
I think it's good practice too to define accessory as including that. And it's late in the year to start talking about a telecommunications ordinance, but I noticed that you don't address it in any way.
Well, we at one time, we used to have an ordinance that banned dishes. And we were told, I believe by town council, that we couldn't do that. That it was against the law to do that.
Correct.
But the towers are different.
Oh, I have no idea. Can you object to a tower being put up?
It's not about objecting, it's about saying where in town they can go
But
and how
so you're
high
saying you
and what the fall, zone should be around it. That they require a bond for taking it back down when it's abandoned. That's normally what you'd put in the telecommunications. But again, it's a little bit late in the year to bring it up, but if maybe think about it for next time you're doing zoning amendment. Just
The
something to keep
document
on the radar.
doesn't say anything about a private individual who wanted to put up a wind generating tower.
That's correct.
I think that's a valid question. If I'm a property owner and I decide I'm gonna put up a wind generator on my own property, does the town have the right to object to it?
Is it considered, would it be considered to be an accessory use? It's the way it reads right now, it's anything incidental, that's necessary and incidental to the fact that you own a home there. So you could argue it's generating power from my home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I don't believe on that kind of tower, there's any height restriction, right? There is in the buildings, but I don't believe we've got any height restriction on accessory buildings or accessory uses of that type. So I think you could do it.
Question of whether Waterville Valley would want that.
Right, well, yeah, but the question, would it be allowed now? I suspect it would be allowed. Particularly if it's on a single family home site, because I'm not even sure who would approve it. I mean, there is no site plan review for single family home sites, so.
David Green.
So do you want to delineate it as an accessory use only? So that somebody can't put something up on a vacant lot?
You certainly wouldn't want a wind farm.
What I was thinking was that you included an accessory uses
Accessory
for
uses.
on-site use.
Right.
Something like the Mountain View brand has a wind tower for its hotel site. An example.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Sure.
But then what we're talking about was the telecommunications towers.
Right, and I mean, it's, and if you wanted to talk about commercial wind and solar, that really can't be part of this project. Because we gotta be in the wrapping up part of it, and it wasn't really what the scope was. But I brought it up just so you kind of have it on the radar for the future, because the assumption really is they can put it anywhere in town if you don't have it in your zoning, and then you don't have any teeth at all of the height or the location or bonding or the fall zone.
Is there any way to put something in that it would be up for restriction without, I mean, if we don't have time to talk about it, Do we want to make sure nothing can get thrown up next year while we're discussing it, or do we just keep it in our?
I guess the way to do that would be to make a special exception in certain districts and worry about the criteria and conditions next time while you're doing uses. That would be an easy way to get some handle on it, but you need to decide what district. I mean, unless it's all, but. No cell service right now. Where's the tower?
That's why I was gonna suggest the White Mountain National Forest would be a good place.
Well,
It
no,
was a
it-
suggestion to put a tower into town square, right?
Well, it's on the roof of the creek,
Well, it is.
that
They
chimney.
got it up.
the
there.
chimney
All right.
that's there.
And that's another thing you'd put in the ordinance is that whenever possible, it would be
Camouflage. Disguise.
stealth. I think is the term that's used, yeah, when it's this gargantuan flagpole, it's stealth. Or the fake trees that just, I hate.
Yeah.
But yeah, chimney, that's even. Cupola. But with the regulations, you can make sure that happens. So you're thinking you wanna get your arms around it by listing it as a special exception?
I think it'd be smart to, wouldn't it? I mean,
I
that
agree,
was
yeah.
wide open.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword with cell towers. I mean, we don't want a town with no cell coverage.
Right.
To get
Right.
cell coverage, you gotta allow them to build equipment.
Right.
And without an ordinance,
Right.
they can put it anywhere. You don't have any
Right.
arms around it at all, so. Which districts?
I think that the other trees just all stuff like.
And I guess it's in village commercial, or is it C1?
What zones do you not want to be?
Any we can see.
Well,
Sorry, that's not helpful.
So in VC and C1, you want it to have to be stealth, but
Mhm.
again, we just don't really have time at this point in the year to start working on it.
Can we qualify it that way, with a special exception in BC and C1 by stealth and White Mountain National Forest? Otherwise,
the topography is they're putting them in the forest for the majority of
It would
There
be
are-
their
Farther
preference.
reaching.
That
The problem is there's certain lines of sight coming down
There
that
are.
it just doesn't work because
That's
of the
right.
mountains. So to get 100% coverage,
You gotta have some.
they would need additional places to put them. That's the
C1
reality.
and C1 and VC as a stealth tower or stealth setup would be, it would be what we have right now.
They're not coming here for permits if it's in the national forest, correct?
Yes, they do. They
Huh.
do. Yeah. The National Forest makes them come to us.
That's
but
good, because I've
it is.
been having some back and forth with the forest about when they need to and when they don't.
And we've had quite a say to the one tower that's been up on mountain, so they've been good about
That's good.
making sure that they get building permits for it.
Did you say it could be in special civic too, or did you just say commercial?
No, I just said commercial and C1. Special civic is fine to, if, as long as they're using stealth and we can have some say as to that's too visible or whatever. I think that that's reasonable. The only other area you're gonna, it's probably not for this year, but is gonna be the north end, and Snows Mountain in that sort of place. So that's just one other place to keep in the back of your mind.
And so, for the rest of this morning. We don't really have time to go through in detail, I think, the amendments, and some of you haven't read it. But it would be helpful if we went through the places I highlighted where I still had questions. And then I'm gonna hold off on any additional changes until I get the comments back on this at the next meeting. We may need an additional meeting. We may need a month or two even, that you have 2 meetings to get back on track, because we've lost a couple months to people not doing their homework. Just gotta say it how it is. So one of the things I highlighted is on page 5. I looked at the definitions to see, some of them seem not to be used anywhere in the uses. Business complex is used in the sign regulations. And I'd ask that you take a look at the sign regulations to make sure that it still does what you want it to, if we get rid of that.
Which line are you referring to, Tara?
I highlighted it up top, business complex.
Yes.
I think it still works for the sign regs because at least with how the sign regs were most recently rewritten, it was just to point to the complex, not to the individual businesses in the complex. So I think the idea was that the complex was identified by the sign so that complex have a name.
But it was specifying 4 or more was a business complex. And if I make this change, it would be 2 as well.
And I think that was used as an argument anyway for local realty, right? That it was a different use and.
Okay.
I think we have precedent.
All right.
In line 18, do you want to say that it's to the direction of travel to arrive at the said business?
What?
Or you?
I'm not working on the signage at all. That was dealt with
Okay.
last year. Dormitory had a question. The definition doesn't right now tell me that it's not a hotel. Or warming house, maybe not a hotel if it's common sanitary, but don't you mean like for students, staff
Right.
participants?
Yeah.
I thought we discussed this.
Wait a second, I'm not so sure that a business complex is described by a building that contains more than one principal use. That doesn't really make sense. Because a building could be like the rec in school, it's not a business complex, is it? Or accounting, or fire department.
We could just say more than one business. Or commercial, non-residential, principal use, some qualifier like that.
So is town hall and fire department a business complex?
I'll make note of that and
I mean, I'm just.
I'll qualify the wording. I'll make note of that. That was a good thought. So on dormitory, you want some qualifying language?
Yeah, it's not really business.
Okay.
Participants in a program or.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Can it be staff? Could it be hotel staff? Or is it just participants in our recreation program? Or?
I mean, it could come to the point where we need a dormitory type situation for staff. Housing.
We have,
is
we have one that's ongoing right now.
the Snow Star.
Yeah, we have this one.
Yeah.
For staff.
Right,
But
well, but I think
they're
they're actually
people
renting
renting.
rooms, aren't
Yeah,
they?
they have
I think they lease
condos.
rooms to outsiders.
So yes for staff.
Well, is the dormitory an accessory use or an allowed? use?
Dormitories are accessory in village commercial and snows.
As long as they're accessory. They won't be a separate standalone business.
All right, so I'll add something. Recreation center, we talked about changing that, but we didn't really talk about changing it now. Page 9, just because it's kind of, you weren't sure it was the right fit. Yeah. How it was written. And I don't have a suggestion because I can't read your minds on what this should be, what you have now that it may or may not fit. Well,
It's one of those phrases that becomes very, very open-ended. Any planning board at any point in time can interpret that to be anything that's related to recreation.
yeah. Is that
So-
good or bad?
I don't know. On rec property, where is it basically allowed? Do we
Problem
allow-
is, it won't be the planning board, Bill, keep that in mind. It'll be your zoning officer that gets an application and has to decide is
Well,
it
in
this or
case,
not?
It is the planning board. I mean, we have a zoning officer.
People aren't coming to the planning board
They
for
come
the
to the planning
zoning
board,
permit.
absolutely. Yeah.
Not in every case,
Not
Bill.
for the
They-
zoning
Not in every
permit.
case, but yeah. But if somebody wanted to build like a jump down into Corcoran's Pond, they came to the planning board.
For site plan review, not to decide whether it's allowed use or not. And if
We
you,
never even got to the review
if you
stage.
deny the site plan review because you don't feel it meets the zoning, then they go to the zoning board to appeal.
Right,
But it's never up to the planning board, whether something's an allowed use or not. This is, right now it is while you write the zoning.
they have a tendency, my feeling it would be they have a tendency to go to the selectmen or the planning board and ask that question. Because it's one of the dilemmas we get into. Nobody wants to do the work necessary for site plan review if we're gonna say it's not an allowed use.
It's not a good habit for the planning board to get in legally. That's a
Could be,
caution about that.
but we don't, I mean, I don't think we have a building inspector. Do we have a
He is the code enforcement officer of the building. It's,
code enforcement officer?
that's right.
So
It's
if
his
somebody
call.
wants to do something, they would have to go to Chris. and
They
he'd
do.
say it's allowed or not.
They do. That's what happens right now. They come in and they
Okay.
talk to Chris and he looks at this list and sees if it's an allowed use. And then if he says, I don't know, he goes to the selectmen and says, I question this because he's appointed by the selectmen. So ultimately, they're the ones who would say yes or no. That's the process that we.
And then if the applicant's not happy with it,
That's
they
right.
appeal to
Then
the
they
zoning
appeal to
board,
the zoning
not the planning board.
VR, not allowed in LDR. So it's a broad swath of whatever they are, where they're allowed.
Mhm.
I mean, I can think of some uses you might not like here that could be interpreted as, there it is pretty broad. Casino, yeah,
Yes.
it certainly came to mind.
Yeah.
Casino and everything that goes with it.
Yeah.
Recreation uses.
Well, it's something to think about maybe as you read the proposed changes.
Outdoor activities.
Think more about that one.
Bingo.
Yes, you know.
Bingo parlor.
Right, it's okay to say not including blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
right? It would be fine to say that you don't mean these couple.
Is there a generic term for like adult pleasure things, like,
No,
Don't use the word adult.
no, then you're gonna get.
You don't want to go there. You guys laugh, but I've had it proposed in another town.
bathroom?
That was a battle.
Tax money.
All right, so be thinking about that and what you might want to list as not. Page 26, there's a whole package of stuff in the Snow Mountain that I wasn't clear what to do with, and I highlighted it here.
The intentionally skip 22.
Give you some background
Yeah.
as to why that Snow Mountain stuff got written the way it was, because it is convoluted.
Right,
But one of the arguments at the time was, we'll allow you to have a dormitory, but you can't rent rooms on the weekend to members of the academy. We tried to restrict that right because it would hurt the commercial properties that are in town. So that's the reason that's in there. Dormitories are allowed, but they have restricted only to the full-time students, and that's it. You can't use them for any purposes other than housing full-time students that are going to the academy.
right.
Now,
And
it's
that's-
poorly written, but that's what the intent was.
And so if you look, we're making some pretty sweeping changes to how this, trying to get it back in line with the
Right.
other districts and the uses and the accessory uses and how we define dormitories. We'll handle that, I think. But before I just wanted to highlight these, bring them to your attention rather than just strike them out to make sure that we've done enough.
Who's, if they wanted to, if they built a dormitory, because the one doesn't exist today, but if they built one up there, they would, as I read the changes, they would be allowed to rent it to people that belong to the academy for the weekends,
We said students and staff.
students and staff. They are, well, they're technically the same people. You see, it depends on the members of the academy. So there are full-time students that are part of the Pinnacle program, and then there are all the weekend attendees. They go to I'm not sure the academy, they obviously differentiate between the two. But, well, as long as we're not letting them use the building for rentals for the weekend. Now, it's a hypothetical building. It's never been built. Will it ever be built? Who knows?
Would be a tough position to try to manage one landowner's dormitory different than another based on competition. That's never a valid zoning proposal.
Well, that was part of the thought that it was a special district because it's not, if you looked at previous zoning, it wasn't allowed at all.
Dormitories were not allowed
Were not allowed.
in the rec zone. They wanted to leave it as recreation zoning, but allow for the BBTS to put up a dormitory building if they wanted to support their programs. But what they were doing was they were having summer camps in for other activities, a music camp or whatever, and they were allowing the students and staff to stay in the dormitory, and that cut into the commercial use of the other businesses in town. So that's why it was set up that way, that the dormitory had to be specific to the BBTS programs. because we wanted to give them the flexibility to have a dormitory building on rec land.
So by having an accessory and defining it with staff and students, have you covered?
Well, staff and students, again, you go back to that summer example, if it's a music camp and the students of that music camp, it's not a VBTS program, but they are students, they're, in a course of study. And you have the people who are teaching that music camp, is that gonna be okay?
You can't link an owner to, you can't have different regulations for one owner.
Well, no, but then if you don't allow the dormitory in that area, you impact their, because it's zoned recreation. Unless you're gonna allow dormitories, originally
Not
It's a special.
now.
right, it's a special,
Right.
special zoning district. But you would in this case with the changes that you've made, dormitories would be allowed in this special zoning district
As accessory.
as
yeah.
accessory
Mhm.
uses. Okay. So then it comes down to a question of what's the accessory use? Is it just for the BBTS programs or is it, can they?
Well, that was the intent, was
Yeah.
to try to some.
Because that was the
extent, provide some
disagreement.
limits around it.
Right. Yeah.
But there's also if they were part of the junior program, could they be counted, if they went to school some of the time, it really gets, and then we talked about, well, maybe somebody would start a tennis camp in the summer. Would they be allowed to stay there? All unanswered.
My answer would be yes, and why is that a problem? Isn't it, don't you want the tennis camp here rather than,
The commercial owners at the time, some of the commercial property owners objected. Because they saw it as losing business.
But I guess it begs the question, are we planning for the future, or are we reacting to how people are feeling now?
Well, it was a compromise to get the thing passed. Otherwise, the academy would have moved out of town, and things would be much worse than they are now.
well, this, this another reason to make sure you have the first public hearing plenty early to.
Yeah,
To
I mean,
regroup
the
and discuss
academy,
things.
the academy, I mean, that solution of that particular property was so that they could buy and use that particular piece of property for the academy's purpose. I mean, plain and simple, that's exactly what we did. Because they said, if you don't do that, we'll go down to Campton, and maybe we'll send the kids up to Loon.
Right. So when you
And
have the
that
public,
would have been the end of a lot of things.
so there might be people, Bill, that you want to make sure and reach out to when you're gonna have the public hearing.
Right.
Make sure they see things, make sure they
Right.
come rather than react later. And that, I recommend you have the first public hearing in October so that you can have November to regroup and make changes and have another hearing in December. Which I really think you're looking at 2 September meetings in order to get there. But the people whose lots you're talking about changing, they'll get notices. But there may be other people in town that aren't gonna see the one in the newspaper or posted that you wanna make sure and reach out to as well. So, think about that highlighted area on page 26 when you're looking at all the changes together. The next thing I highlighted was on page 29. You have loading birth dimensions, and I've just never seen that in zoning before. I've never even seen it in site plan regulations. And I wondered if there's a reason to have it like that.
Well, it's even funnier, because I don't think we have any voting births in town.
Yeah, you do. You have them over at the conference center and you have them at Town Square. There's, well, they're not loading berths in the sense of having a dock, although the
Right.
one at the conference center has a dock. But I believe this was probably stuck in there at the beginning because of, quite frankly, the trash truck and trying to make sure that things were set up so they weren't too cramped. It's probably the thought process. Was it carried through? No. Do you need it? Probably not.
So something you might do is, because I don't think you have this language in here, is add some language that it can't be designed where some move or back out in public highways.
Right.
I think that was probably your intent, but I'd get rid of the dimensions. I mean, it just, if I was a zoning administrator, I'd be wondering, well, so many deliveries at UPS and FedEx or vans or those transit connects. Does that apply, or is this just a tractor trailer kind of thing? It's a little more specific than to be in zoning.
So you're gonna make that change, Dar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
On page 32, I just don't know what this means. Open lot storage of material and equipment accessory to a business on the same premises may be permitted on an open lot. Are you talking about storage of material and equipment in the open space part of a lot? That wouldn't normally be something you'd allow in the temporary, just not sure what this was envisioning. Do you have examples of what this might have been?
Yeah, the golf course, the storage of the sand and other materials that they use on the maintenance of the course. They just use the open space beside the maintenance building. So this just says they don't have to build a structure over that. I think that's probably one of the primary uses that they were thinking.
What district is that in?
It's
Is it in the rec?
in the rec,
Was it?
so it's right there in this area. They used to be up here, so but it's always been in the rec.
So, talking about a lot that requires a high percentage of open space? Is that the problem?
I think it's a double use of the word open, it's kind of confusing, but I think open lot storage would be, it's not covered.
It doesn't have to be covered.
And you push
Right.
stuff in, but then it kind of confuses a little bit when it says the business of the same premises is rented on an open lot, which is,
Yeah.
I think it's used in two different ways.
That's right. That's right.
So I think, yeah, and I think that the golf course is the perfect example of it.
Yes.
Open storage on the open part of the lot.
I think
That's
it's okay, so with that lot, this is talking about what you can do with the portion of the lot that's required open space. And in the recreation district, 95% of the lot is required as open space. So
Right.
it is probably
Mhm.
written really specific to that lot, and maybe allowing something that you don't want to see on other lots, like the green space that you require around a hotel. You probably don't want.
We don't want
Equipment
them
stored there.
Yeah.
That's the problem with writing something in the zoning that's
Mhm.
for one owner or one
Right.
lot. You can have unintended consequences.
Can you put that under the rec zone as a use, as an accessory use? Is that a better
I'll think
way to-
about how to fix it.
Okay. But that's what it was primarily for.
Yeah, I'll fix it. I just can't. I need to have not gotten up at 5 to think of
Yes.
the stat one. Some of them are just too much. What's the other one here? Anything else? Those are all the yellow ones.
Yep.
I skipped over the one on the National Forest because I do have some language that I got that I talked to them about yesterday that I want to try out and see if it's going to work. I'll have that next. But I think about these changes, but not send you another draft because I want you to have read the one you have, and then we'll be able to make a quicker turnaround for a follow-up meeting.
Can I ask you to address one thing that didn't come up? On page 8, pave, where we give this is the definition, we give the description of paving. We've run into this before, and have never really come to terms with it, but it's defined as covered with a material, hot bituminous paving, oil penetration, brick, cobblestone, or similar to form a firm, smooth surface. What if you had crushed stone and you rolled the crushed stone to a firm surface? It's temporarily firm and it's temporarily smooth. Obviously, in a season, it's going to have to be redone or something like that. Is that considered paved? Or gravel, where you roll it out and it's firm?
No, I don't normally see a definition for paved. Usually, the standards are in the subdivision regulations where you are talking about the hot bituminous paving. You don't usually see it in the zoning too.
Well,
It's confusing, I think, probably. Do you have that in your subregs? I don't remember.
I don't know.
No, I don't think we do. Because
But
this
this is an issue
definition,
that says it does come up.
I think it's because the definition was here, it was not put in the subdiv regs.
Well, isn't there some statement that says, that these are definitions in one set of regs, another set of regs?
Probably,
Yeah,
but
that's between the subdivisions.
list and oil penetration, that's just kind of weird in paving. I mean, I could see if you wanted to allow alternates like brick or cobblestone.
Paving is not defined in the subdiv.
But does it say hot bituminous pavement is required on road?
It also refers to parking areas too.
I thought we allowed people to come up with more environmentally friendly ways of paving their own driveways.
You want to encourage pervious pavement.
Yeah.
Well, but then you get to the problem that we run into over with the supplemental parking for the town square. where it's-
Site
Oh,
plan,
yeah, I was talking more driveways
Yeah.
than I was
I'm thinking of
parking.
parking, large parking areas, where that's where the problem came up before. because
Yeah.
Then there's the definition, well, we figured it out. Gravel could be considered paved.
so the the site plan review regs,
Yeah.
Bill's right, refer back to the
They don't refer to
zoning.
zoning, they refer to the.
No, they refer to the zoning,
Okay.
and subdivision
Oh, okay.
definitions apply to the site plan review regs.
So I didn't know if that's where it's going to be, if we could get a little more clarification.
All right, I'll think on that.
Something about something that doesn't have to be regraded every year.
Mm-hmm. It's not gravel.
It's gonna maintain some sort of compaction. That's what you're talking about, and asking if that's paved.
Crushed stone, when you put it down, and roll it, I mean, that would be defined as
Right.
firm and.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the time being.
Mhm.
I have a question of information, it's curiosity. Why is there reference in this document to agricultural use and the raising of animals as permitted use?
I don't know, I didn't.
Because it's a state
State
law
law.
that says that
And
every
we
zone.
we could not, we used to have a clause that basically said you're not allowed to have animals on these zones. Well, or, other than a dog. And then we found out that by state law, we couldn't make such a statement, and we in fact must allow them someplace. So we say, if you got 5 acres, they're allowed as long as you follow the GMP for raising and keeping a farm animal.
It's more that if you don't address it, the assumption is it's allowed anyway.
It's allowed anywhere.
That's how the
right.
state law works.
Yeah. So this restricts it, and it was because somebody wanted to bring horses in and house the horses. And we said, well, if you want to, and they want to put a tent up to house the horses. So we said so this was passed, it basically said you need 5 acres to do it, and you've got to be able to convince the ZBA that you're following good management practices for the raising and keeping of farm animals. And they're pretty strict. They're pretty tough. But if you did that, technically it'd be allowed. You'd be allowed to have a horse or a cow.
Well, Town council gave us this wording, and we were told that there is a requirement in state law, and that's what the reference is in the zoning ordinance, RSA 124, whatever it is there. And that's why we came up with this language. So it was at the advice of council because, there was not anything in any of our zoning ordinance that said that agricultural uses were allowed. And apparently
Right,
they
so it
are.
would have been interpreted as allowed
That's-
anywhere.
That's right. And that's the thing, we would have had to allow a farm in LD. So this is the way to restrict it, according to our town council.
Could
Well,
we,
you can't restrict it.
Well,
Even in LDR, you cannot restrict it. So if somebody bought a whole
That's-
bunch
No,
of pieces
that's
of
not
property.
no, you can't
That's not
prohibit it.
correct.
You can't prohibit it, but you can restrict it with
Restrict it.
regulations.
you can restrict it to certain parts of town.
No,
We were told no.
that's-
Yeah, no, most towns do.
Then we did it incorrectly. Our town council told us, LDR, you can't, if somebody meets the criteria, you gotta allow them to do it.
That's what we were told. So you and I can talk about that. I'll give you the background.
Can we schedule the second September meeting now so that we can all have it on our calendars? I'm sure that we're gonna need 2 in order to stay on track.
Right now, it would be the
Regular meeting will be the 13th.
13th, yes.
So, just to be clear, so for those meetings, so it seems like you had expectations that you were going to have edits forwarded to you in preparation for this meeting?
That you were gonna have read it and have your comments on.
Okay, yeah, no, that's how I read the email. It just seemed
Great.
like you expected us to have sent you something. You're
No, not
talking
send
about
it,
doing
but some
homework
people
or.
didn't even look at it. So.
Okay, all right. But is that something maybe to consider to expedite it? I mean, do you want edits so we can come in and make this more expeditious? I mean, it probably is still 2 meetings. That's my sense. I'm sorry, I'm new. I'm just, what's your thoughts on that?
I think sending me non-substantive comments is probably a good thing. Where
Okay.
you've caught things I missed or whatnot, or typos or whatnot, but the substance we've probably need to go through it page by page
Sure,
as a
sure.
group, so
Okay,
that's why I think it's, with all of this together, it's gonna take.
sounds good. Thank you.
So do you want another meeting in August, or you want two in September?
August is pretty
Yeah, August is
full.
too crazy.
What are you trying to
I mean,
make money?
I could
I know,
do,
right?
if you're trying to stay with 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, you could do the 23rd or 30th of August. If you wanted to do that.
I cannot do the 23rd. I could do the 30th.
I can't, I'm losing staff in August, I can't do the.
School schools.
Yeah.
So then,
The 20th or the 27th of
then for
September.
September, I'd say I
For
could
the
do the
6th.
20th.
I will not be available, but I can give you my comments because I did go through them and wrote them down.
Or we could look at the 6th as well.
Think about that.
I can't do that 20th.
No, it'll be the same.
Or the 27th, or look at a different day of the week, or is Karen your schedule?
I could probably do a different day of the week in September.
The 6th and the 27th.
How about the 20th? How's the 20th work? Just because my,
Doesn't seem to work for me, but I have to check this, whether I got this wrong.
just that my night meeting is earlier that night than 27th and the night before, so that just makes it,
We'll go check
makes
something.
me a little sharper.
Yeah, no, I am not available on the 20th.
Is it that whole week?
Yes, I'm gone the entire week.
Does the 6th work for people?
It's okay with me.
Okay,
Somebody said no.
Well, I think it's easier for someone to miss the 6th than the 20th because you're gonna be finalizing, so have two more conversations, have the final decisions of what's going to the public hearing on the 13th. Just think of, if someone's gonna have to miss something, make it the 6th. Because then you're gonna hear what changes were made on the 13th. You're gonna miss that too?
I'm gone from the 5th to the 15th.
Well, we won't have Terry's ideas. Oh, well.
But
But
I could do the
Public
same
hearing.
thing. I could,
Yeah,
No.
let her know.
you don't want to have both meetings without your chair, I don't think. But why don't we go with the 20th and I'll advocate
Bill's
for Bill's comment.
Mhm.
The 13th and the 20th
Yeah.
of September.
Right.
Okay, so we're set for the 20th.
Bill, are you sending me comments or did you have something to hand me?
I'll give it to you right now.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Tara.
We'll try to be better prepared next time. Okay, any other old business?
Have a good rest of the summer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You too, Tara. Bye-bye.
See you in a few weeks.
Any new business? Reports?
Yeah. So, our gateway project. As I had mentioned last meeting, we were anxiously awaiting bids from contractors the end of July, which is 26th or so. The select board received one bid. Yeah. And so I'm just gonna do a brief overview where we're at now, but there are some issues with how we're approaching things like this that we need to discuss as well. But so for the short term, the single bid put us over budget significantly. And what we are looking at doing is meeting with the select board today to discuss the best way forward. The one contractor, Dana, who's done a lot of work in town before, the one contractor came in at like almost $220,000, which was significantly more than we were thinking. A portion of that, of course, that he didn't know beforehand. If y'all remember, back over in the winter, we had him look at briefly the streetscape to see what approximately we'd be looking at if we did the single sidewalk, if we did the double side, multi-use pathway. And we had those initial thoughts from them, but they weren't based on the detailed needs of, running electricity and the scope of the concrete stand for the sign and the fact that he was the only bidder. So none of that was allowed for in the estimate. So what he's done is he's broken it down, he's had communications with Jim, and he's broken down what we would need to do the sign, and we could proceed and still be well under budget with just doing the sign, but not doing the roadwork portion. And rebidding out the roadwork portion to look at doing it in the spring, or potentially going back to town meeting to request more funding, just in case, who knows what's happening with cost of paving, etc., just in case we can't get it under budget. So yeah, meeting with the select board at 3:00 today to determine the best way forward. And that's where we're at now. In our discussions as to, how the heck did we get here, we have also, and just to recap how this works, with this, or how this has worked with this project anyway. We worked through the town floor, with the town floor working group, looked at the pedestrian study. The gateway project seemed like, well, in our minds, a significant project and a fair amount of money to spend. We went and got whatever information we could acquire before town meeting. And that information that we got, of course, was without spending much money. So we couldn't get a full engineering scope to get what we're finding out now, a real project. So we ended up going to town meeting, asking for what we thought was an appropriate amount of money, and with a short timeline. There had been 3 contractors who attended the meeting.
The pre-bid.
The pre-bid, thank you, meeting. Yeah, and the time frame was tight because we're trying to get this project done. And well, the ground freezes here for a significant part of the year. So our tight timeline And basically, what we're coming to the realization of is that we need to approach projects like this differently. Not only is our time frame that we're trying to get this done in too short, our scope of projects are too small. In discussing what contractors are interested in doing, what they'll set the time aside for. Apparently, it's generally closer to $1 million projects that are worth the time and schlepping stuff out to this distance, not $200,000 to $300,000 projects. One of our, and sorry, it's kind of jumbled, we've met like 2 or 3 times over the past couple of weeks since getting that data, and it was rather disappointing. But basically, you know, our thought going forward is that we need to have a completely different approach to projects like this, wherein we would do a fair amount of project planning ahead of time. So have like one funding request for engineering for, say, half of the road work or even more, maybe the entire system that we want to have done in the valley. And it would be an expense, but then that engineering would all be done. And we'd be able to break that up into portions where we'd be able to get a better value for the project. You know, it would mean spending or bonding more at any given portion, but it would also mean getting a better bang for our buck. What we've been finding out is doing $200,000 to $300,000 projects, we're spending significantly more than if we were to do it $1 million. You know, buying bulk at BJ's, right? It's cheaper than going to Hanford's every week. And so that applies for paving projects, infrastructure, et cetera, as well. That's basically where we're at. So yes, I'm sure you can clarify, Mark.
Yeah, no, you did a good job. The other part of this, not only was it the short period of time for the contractor to actually do the work, but it was a short period of time for the engineer to do his work and a very small engineering budget because we had appropriated a small amount. So we did not do a line item bid. So we had 3 bidders that attended the pre-bid. We told them that you are not going to have to give us a line item bid. You're going to give us a lump sum bid. That was because that took a week or more off of the engineering side of the timeline. And then, so you had lump sum bids are generally, you can't go in and pick and choose what you're going to do. So you have no flexibility on the bid. It's either a take it or leave it type of bid. And the contractor can to the electrical subcontractor, whatever it is, and you don't know, how that's broken down. It's just a number.
What's the original estimate, $250,000?
No, the original, we had a couple of general estimates that were 2 sides of the road about 300 or 350, somewhere in that range. And then the 1 side of the road, which was 250 to 300 or something like that. But do you have them there?
Yeah, the original estimates,
Yeah.
which did not include work, as a layperson, it's confusing to me because we have the Horizons engineer, did this for us, but they didn't do the boring, they didn't cover it. So the original estimate for the single side of the road with the multi-use pathway was $135,000.
And the 250 was adding in
But that's
engineering.
that's not a rebuild on the road though. That was probably based on
Just a repaving.
an overlay.
Okay, but the town appropriated $250,000.
That's right,
And
and
the bid came in at 200,000.
that's correct.
Or just the road work? not
No,
the sign?
just the
Oh,
road
that
work.
doesn't include-
That didn't
No,
include the
that
sign.
did not include the sign, it did not include the engineering or any,
That's your bid with a
That's-
single bid.
that was the bid
Yeah,
with a
Yeah.
single
single
bid.
bids.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so what Wendy is talking about is just extending the timeline, do the engineering up front. And we're talking to Horizons about a way to get this rebid this. Now that they've done the detailed engineering on the project, we can come up with an amount of money that we would need to appropriate in 2019 to add, but have an actual bid process before town meeting, so that if the bid comes in lower than what we're expecting, we can shrink that appropriation at town meeting. If it comes in more, you can show town meeting that it came in higher. And then by having a bid, we also can start work the day after town meeting. We can sign a contract, and instead of being at the end of the line, we'll be at the beginning of the line. And I really think that it's going to give us more bids. It's going to be better information for town meeting, and it's going to allow us to do these projects in a reasonable time frame rather than try to cram them in at the end of the year.
So Mark, just a question, was there in the appropriation that
Yeah.
was passed at town meeting?
Yeah.
Was there anything that was time specific that said it had to be done by such and such a date?
No,
No. And you could choose as the board of selectmen to encumber the funds, right?
oh yes, absolutely.
Right.
Well,
So you can, so the time restriction, you could get the work done 2 years from now, in theory. I mean,
that's correct.
Yeah.
So.
in theory.
So what the town core working group has talked about, do you want to tell them about the recommendation to the selectmen?
Yes, we'd like to go forward with the construction of the sign and get that, and then have Dana do, he said be about 48,000 to cut the road for the electrical conduit to establish the, do what needs to be done on that left-hand side of the road as you're coming in. For the concrete pad and for shoring up, there needs to be a guardrail to help ensure that no one tumbles. Anyway, just to get that all secure. So this is with wooden and signs, to get the sign constructed, and get that part of it finished. And then it's just the multi-use pathway and reworking the road that'd be left.
Could I just say, like, I'm trying not to like speak too much in these meetings because I'm ramping up and, I don't know a lot of the background and all those things. But I do know negotiating contracts and program management and those type of things from my prior life. So like in any initiative, you have, scope, schedule, and cost. And you have to optimize on one of those and give on one of those. And it seems like to the point, in this case, it's schedule. We've lived without any decent signage here for a period of time. So what we can like focus on is like scope and cost. Like anytime, right now you have a single bid on an initiative, okay? It's this, that, or the other in decisioning. You need at least 3, right? Before you can actually make a sound decision. And because maybe like I was at town meeting, my first town meeting. I've lived here now a year in 2 days from now. So what do I know, right? But it was, oh, we're gonna get it done and this summer and start in July and whatever, and we're starting to, prep and all those kind of things. Why don't we just take that, stress off our decisioning? If it doesn't happen till next year and it happens right, great. So now let's go back to, cost and scope. Like what is it and whatever. So we have one. If we step into starting down a path with one vendor on a component, we're losing our leverage, right? How about, again, I'm sorry, I like it. I'm trying not to be assertive, because I have no context here, right? Is like step back, let's put together an RFP, put it out to bid, and let's not limit ourselves to traditional contractors here. Let's go out and let's expand that, because we can probably go into Vermont and Massachusetts, so on and so forth. And I don't know who bid on this or didn't bid on it, but it does seem a little incestuous as I watch projects going on here, and let's, take a pragmatic approach. Luckily, I'm an alternate on the planning board, and I've done an awful lot of this. And let's put it out there. Let's set expectations that it's a next year project, for town meeting. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself here. But, and just say, no, we're going to do it right. $250,000 certainly seems like a reasonable amount of money for what the scope of up to Valley Road, and to put a sign that makes total sense. And we, kind of go from that. So sorry for, actually opening my mouth here, but, I'd say, I think maybe slow down. Let's put together a formal RFP, put it out there, bring that back to, the management of the town, and, and say, okay, now here's what schedule looks like, giving within scope of what has been discussed and defined now within the cost that has been already voted on and approved by the taxpayers in the town, or residents in the town.
Yeah, and to your point, I think the committee's concern was that we have, we've spent, of course, some money on both the engineering and towards the sign development already. We're about 30,000 into the project at this point.
All reasonable.
And the pedestrian study that started it all was the 90,000. There's concern in the committee that the townsfolk really want to see some progress, and we felt like the sign would show that the ball is rolling. It was why, as a group, we thought that would make sense.
Maybe we can canvas.
No,
No.
It actually looks pretty good.
no.
Imagine
I think we're the
it.
only one that thinks
Oh.
that.
Yeah.
I think we feel very strongly that putting the actual sign up would make a big difference and actually generate more positive feelings towards voting for the road work down
It passed by one vote.
It passed by one
You won't
vote,
get
and
more
that's,
money before that sign goes up to.
Yeah.
well, that's just
They
it. We
don't see
don't,
any
we don't want to
progress.
have nothing there and then go back and say, it's realistically, we need $50,000 or $75,000 more to put this back out to bid. Or we could put it back out to bid and have that happen and need $50,000 more, and we have nothing out there to show for the one vote approval of
Was it really one
funds.
vote?
It was one vote.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not a selector.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Rather show that.
I mean, wasn't the real question though, that we're paying so much more per foot of road
Yeah.
with this project versus doing a whole mile of the town, that's really what we would like to propose to the townspeople, is it's kind of foolish to just do that. Why don't we do more?
And I
that's
think
what we should use
the
the engineering money for, is to do the whole.
Making the money BJ's.
the way to attract those additional bidders and to get somebody to come over from, I think that's a great idea.
Because nobody's
There
gonna
are-
come from far away.
They're not gonna,
Piece of road.
the contractors have told us we're not gonna bid because I've got $1 million project that I'm working on. I'm not gonna move equipment up here for a $200,000 or $300,000 project. Now,
It's not
if you have
gonna
$1
be that
million
much.
one, then I can start moving stuff around and bring on crew and all of that they need to make it happen. And that's what we're up against.
How does that go out to bid?
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
Well, we
Do you put it on Facebook? Do you?
no,
just put it in
there's
the paper? What do you do?
well, depending on the size of the project.
Yeah.
We have used, there are construction advertisement companies Our engineer has a list of contractors that he's worked with on other projects that are similar scope and that sort of thing. So word of mouth, newspapers, yeah, sometimes, but they don't really work.
And so the
So-
bidders that we had were just very local.
Yeah, they were very local, very small, because those are the only guys who,
It's a small project on a small
It's-
stretch of road, nobody's gonna move paving equipment.
Right.
very far.
And the other thing too is that the guys that are bidding this, it's a $200,000 bid, 130 of that is to subcontractors. There's only 70 in it for the guy that's bidding it,
that's right. That's right.
you know? So that's here. And remember, it's a little more costly because you're adding 10 feet of pavement.
But some of the expense you're saying is the preparation for the electrical for the sign. Couldn't the sign be put in without light at first and just be put up and save that whole road work for another project?
Well, all of the road work and the addition of the pedestrian path is all separated out.
The prep for the electrical.
Well, the prep for the electrical is just digging the trench to get the electrical line there. It's
The bigger part
not,
is the concrete pad and-
yeah, they gotta build the area where the sign's gonna go. They gotta put a concrete pad in there for the sign to sit on. They gotta clear and grub the trees out of the way so we can see it. And they gotta put an electrical line that's gotta come up through the electrical or the concrete pad and the earthwork. So it's really localized to just the sign work. There's nothing with the path or the road that we are
Is the
doing.
electrical feed outside the limits of the paving or is it within the paving?
It's within there'll be a small
Well,
trench.
It's across the
It's
street.
across the road.
But if they didn't do the electrical now, we'd be breaking apart the sign. when
Right.
it was done to
But-
get
Well,
it.
you can
It's
run
all
it by-
integral to the sign and the concrete pad and everything
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
So you might as well have him run the electric.
Energizing the sign is minuscule.
Right.
I mean, you might as well energize it if you're putting in the infrastructure to do that, because you have to.
I'm under the impression there was some sort of preliminary road work that was gonna have to be done in order to do the electrical.
No,
That's not the case.
So just getting back to John's question, I mean, have we documented our requirements, whether you call an RFI, RFP, whatever you want to call it? The requirements and put it out to bid and say, hey, here's a preliminary budget and put that out to, professional contractors, beyond the, 5 that are in the North Woods area here.
For this amount of money, you're not gonna get anybody.
Right.
Who's gonna come in here? There are local
So,
contractors.
No.
I'm just saying.
I am new to this world.
We're an import
I know,
export town.
I know,
That's one of the problems.
But is it documented anywhere?
yes,
Oh, yeah.
we contacted 5 contractors.
Right.
Which are not just the guys doing the
Right.
work in here. But we contacted 5 contractors. 3 of those 5 expressed interest.
Yeah.
Picked up plans, our specs and all that.
Yeah.
Came to a pre-bid.
They came to all 3 of those came to a pre-bid meeting.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
then-
no, I'm not
No,
challenging the
no,
thing.
no,
I'm just
no,
saying,
no,
like,
I'm just-
is there a
yeah.
document that, like, you could email to me to,
Sure.
because,
Absolutely.
if it's been presented to everywhere, great. I'm just wondering if it's actually like, here's our needs, specs, so on and so forth.
Yep.
Because, at some point, I'm a taxpayer. I went to my first town meeting last year, and I heard, okay, 250,000 all makes sense. Here's what it is. But of course, it's like a ton of detail under that,
Sure.
I'm just wondering if it's actually written down and,
It is.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
I
cool.
can, I'll share that
It
with
is,
you right after the meeting.
But
I'll
to
show you.
Jim's point,
I'm Rob, by
it's
the
just
way.
a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, when we have a $3 or $4 million job like the water line, you can get somebody like Hiltz to come in
That's
and
right.
bid on it. But
Absolutely.
other than that, they're not.
That's right.
They
They're not gonna
wouldn't
look
even
at-
show up at the meeting.
Look, here's another, so all of Triple I Road, remember after Irene and then they had the overlay of Route 49, and we tagged on Triple I
Right.
Road and did all of that. That is probably the lowest per foot cost project that we've done here. And we completely rebuilt that road and everything else. And we got Continental Paving, one of the biggest paving companies around, to do that because we tagged on with the state. And the state had $1.2 million project, and we tagged on a $400,000 project to that. But look at everything we got done for that $400,000. If we had just put out that section of road, we would have paid probably $600,000, and Continental never would have even looked at it.
It made
So-
sense then to put off that road work until they come in and do that other road, because that could be done pretty soon.
That's right.
The entry.
That's right. So, but those are the sorts of things, is to go back to our CIP, look at our road projects, get it engineered, right? And then you've got a solid plan that you can then say, okay, we're gonna do this road, and this road all together, all at once. It's all engineered, and put it out to bid and see what happens to the per foot cost.
So do you think that makes sense?
Well, I
You know,
think
like
it's-
take the sign and
what's-
maybe take the 250 that everybody voted on and look at, you know, like whatever the right loop is, you know, kind of thing. Is that what you,
We'll use
sense
a
would
portion
be
of the
right.
250, build the sign now so that they can see something. We'll have about 120,000 left for actual paving, right, road work. And then we can combine that with some other roads, do some additional engineering so that we have a longer stretch of road, and then put everything back out to bid, including Valley Road. And we'll just tell the contractor that we've reduced the scope of his work to just the sign. And then we're gonna rebid the road.
So,
that sounds smart.
I think that, you know, but we gotta get the engineering on that started so that we can get it bid before town meeting
And know,
and
What
know
we're
what the
going
number is.
yes, know our
Right.
numbers accurate. And not have to rush. I mean, it's just crazy.
Okay. Thank you. Good select board.
Yeah. As I said, I don't want to make that decision. One vote, wow.
Abstain.
Yeah, you can't. Not allowed today.
Okay, communications, Carrie, you did something about quality valley.
Yeah, so the planning board has something from the Department of Environmental Services that a wetlands permit came up for Waterville Valley tax map. I'm gonna pass it around. It's for Waterville Valley Resort. And it was sent back just incomplete. So he has to be able to do some more to the permit. This can get passed around, or I can scan it and email it to all of you guys.
Why is this coming? Was it addressed
why
to
is
the
the
planning
planning
board?
It was
Why is
addressed to
coming-
the planning board. It was specifically
Oh, from the-
addressed,
They
yeah.
sent it back to us, even though we
Yeah.
didn't have anything to do with it. Okay.
So,
Why would
but
you do that?
it's noted just as an information. So Department of Environmental Services wants to
And do you know where roughly where was the permit requested for?
We can get
Permission to speak?
Oh,
That was me.
okay.
So I'll just tell you my opinion on it too. I have to. I sent them a good document. Mark knew about it. And they didn't even look at it and they sent it back. They were talking about north arrows and scales. So I called them up and we are good to go after phone calls. And now that and I'm surprised that, I forgot. It's like, oh yeah, you guys were in the loop too. I gave you the first one. And through phone calls and emails, and then I sent back the original. I added pictures is the only thing that I was missing. And it's about draining our snowmaking pond. They've given us the verbal. What we do, it's a maintenance project, and it's a permit by notification for the wetlands part of this. to the DES. We do this about every 5 years, drain the pond, wait for it to dry out, take the sediment out of it so it doesn't get into our snowmaking system, put that sediment in a lot, let it leach even more, use that sediment on the bill. So, surprised that you got that, but it is my stuff.
Well, and I'm surprised actually that you got it because the Conservation Commission just had a meeting about this very project last night. And it was a permit by notification. And the only reason actually that I knew about it was because there was a request to do an expedited version of the PBN. So you can cut down the amount of time for the DES review. If the Conservation Commission signs off on the plan, which Mike Fergal had signed off on the plan, so the review period had gone from 25 days down to 10 days. Other than that request, the town actually has no, in a permit by notification, it's between the engineer and the property owner and DES. So our town is not usually involved in that PBN process unless there's the request of, and it's only of the Conservation Commission, it has nothing to do with the planning board. So I don't know why, they must have thought maybe you approved the project in site plan review or something, but I don't know why you would have a say in it at all. It's on White Mountain National Forest land. It's between the ski area and the Forest Service. So
Does the letter require a response?
No, it does not.
Just an information.
Yeah, it was just an information for the planning board because it was mailed directly to you guys, for you guys just to know about it.
The issue was solved in a matter of 2 hours.
That's quick.
Yeah, it is. So I just didn't want you to think that you should have seen a plan or anything like that. That's fine.
JP, it is okay now, it's just the pictures that you were.
Oh yeah, we got the okay to do it.
Good.
And just so you know, in case you hear about it, there are 2 other PBNs out there. One for the town entrance project and one for the dam project. So those are all in the works at DES, and our engineers prepared them and we submitted them.
Okay, any other communications, Gary?
Nope.
All right, that being the case, anybody got anything you want to bring up? Privilege of the floor. Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
You've been here too long. Well, there's going to be probably a conversation at the selectmen's meeting next Wednesday, not today's meeting, but their regular meeting, about the trail circuit. I don't know if any of you have heard about initiatives to, so that's just something that is going on. We've had some private citizens and the WVAIA who have been talking to the Forest Service about the use of trails here in the valley and the fact that we have the oldest networked trail in the United States. They've been doing research. The Historical Society, I guess, has been involved in that too. And they've all determined, everybody's in agreement that we are the oldest. And so they wanted to design a looped trail and market that as, in an effort to participate in the trail use that's going on in the state of New Hampshire right now. And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but Franconia Notch, they have traffic problems, people parking on I-93, and they've got message boards up and everything else. And yet we have an occupancy rate of 50% here in the valley. And we've got better trails than those people are killing each other trying to use. So there's going to be an effort with the business community, AIA, to try to increase uses of the trail. And that's actually what Marvin Weinberger was waiting to talk to you guys about. But there is, that's going to be out there. And so any way that we can do it, whether it's signage as part of our CIP, the town, or however else we can help, I think it's very important that we try to participate in this. I mean, they have so many people right now that the North Country Council has started a shuttle bus service from Bethlehem to Franconia and in that whole region to just try to get people to park elsewhere. And I don't know if you guys have driven the Kank lately, but even on the midweek days, every trailhead has cars parked out on the Kank.
We have the problem here. We have the same problem here. Welsh Dickey is just.
Welsh Dickey is overflowing, absolutely.
But in town.
Yeah.
But in town here, we don't have anybody, and we got plenty of parking, so.
We need to make those little forks.
Exactly.
This is a huge opportunity
This
for
is-
Waterville Valley.
That's right.
For branding as well.
Yeah.
For the oldest trails in the country, we maintain them
That's right.
ourselves. We have our club that does that,
That's right.
and fill beds in the valley.
That's right.
As well.
During the
Amazing.
summer, that's right.
Yeah, and just to pile on there, so Marvin actually came to our historical society first meeting and presentation on Saturday. He brought it up. Actually, a few of us are getting together this afternoon at 4 o'clock down in the valley. Or down in the village. We're going to meet at the gazebo and just to drive that on, because Marvin's actually going back to Philly.
Right.
He's not a resident, but man, does he have detail and motivation around that. Yeah, and it's that whole continuous loop, one of only 5 in North America. There's just so much behind that. Some of it historical, some of it commercial, for the valley and opportunities there. So yeah, it's all good stuff.
We need to second it.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All right. Hey, Mark,
Yes, sir.
how is the state doing with their plan on the dam? Have they approved?
Yeah, we're finishing up the 100% plan. They've approved up to 90% already. And we are on schedule to start
So
construction.
they're okay. So they kind of agreed finally on what needs to be done.
Yep.
Okay. Good. Thanks. Hi, how are you?
Yay.
Nice to meet you.
9 million.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, how are you?